Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the core wound of the dismissive avoidant attachment style, but also fearful avoidant attachment style can experience this a lot. And of course, anxious or secure can have this sort of as a one-off, but usually not as deeply as DAs and sometimes FAs. And this is the core wound of I am defective or something's wrong with me is often how I also hear this phrased. So this is a sneak peek from one of our courses, our Advanced Core Wounds course, where we do a deep dive into all of the 22 major core wounds, and we talk about how to reprogram at the belief level, the thought level, how do we emotionally equilibrate and soothe ourselves when this wound is active, and then also how to reprogram at the action level as well. So belief, thought, emotion, and action. And we talk a lot about what the experience is like to have this core wound and sometimes where it can come from. So before I dive into teaching you about this core wound and what you can do about it, we are doing our sale to support our community. We have 25% off of membership bundles, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. We're going to keep this until this isolation and strange kind of time around the world is up. And we're running a PDS 90-day challenge, which means our data essentially is telling us that people have a huge success rate of becoming secure within the first 90 days if they're completing 2 courses a month according to the Personal Development School guide, which you get when you sign up in the order that we recommend, and attending 2 live webinars a week out of the 4 that we run. And so we are challenging you guys to jump in to become secure going into 2021. And we have an exclusive members group for that. People who are already members are obviously totally welcome to join that. The link for that is in the description box below, and you can track your progress and share stories and what's working for you and connect with people, so you also have a bit of a community going into the fall and winter season. So I hope you join us, enjoy, and let's watch this video. Let's discuss the very important core wound, I am defective or something's wrong with me. So the most prevalent potential origin of where this core wound comes from is usually some form of emotional neglect in childhood. Now, this can also be emotional neglect plus criticism, excessive shaming of a family member, or a very specific, very painful, shameful experience in childhood that impacted you, where you either felt publicly shamed, you felt like you were a part of something that was very shameful, whatever that might be. But the biggest one I often see the most is, like I said, emotional neglect. And the reason that emotional neglect tends to imprint so profoundly is when a child is young, they don't have the logical capacity to see if their parents are emotionally neglectful, that, oh, my parents are emotionally unavailable and they're not doing their job as effectively as they could be. Instead, a child who's wired for attunement, wired for attachment, needs closeness and connection, and feels like it keeps getting rejected when they are so giving of it, all they can give meaning to is that, oh, it must be something about me that's wrong or defective, and that's why I'm not getting my needs met. And so it's very easy to personalize that, and the childhood mind does a lot of personalization and gives itself a lot of fault. And so this can be where the deepest roots of this wound come about. And it's also important to recognize that if you have a caregiver who's somewhat emotionally available, but you grow up and that caregiver keeps making you responsible for their feelings and their problems and really brings you into things before they should be, that in and of itself is an element or a form of emotional neglect. And that's important to recognize and be aware of. Now, the emotions usually attached to this core wound are things like shame, big time, sometimes numbness, anger, sadness, hurt, helplessness, and defeat. And it's important to recognize that what shame makes us want to do is hide, withdraw, protect. And this often leads to the experience in one's adult life of deactivating, not wanting to be seen, avoidance, avoiding intimacy and closeness, and not knowing if closeness and vulnerability are safe. And the effect this has is obviously an unwillingness to be vulnerable, intimate, self-shaming quite often, putting oneself down, feeling like you have a lack of self-belief or deep self-confidence, and becoming focused largely on self-preservation, wanting to save face or hide, or even put on an act in your relationship to others and sort of pretend to be somebody other than you are, or to really hide your imperfections and vulnerabilities in relationship to others. And ultimately, this leads us to feel disconnected, misunderstood, and not closely bonded or unconditionally loved by the people around us, because they can't see all of the parts of ourselves that we are hiding actively. And if we don't show those parts of ourselves to others, we're not going to feel loved in the totality of who we are. Now, of course, the associated attachment style that carries these wounds by far and away the most are dismissive avoidant, but fearful avoidants can experience this as well, because often fearful avoidants have some form of emotional neglect in their childhood. Anxious preoccupied can feel this sometimes specific to their fears of abandonment, like, what's wrong with me that I think this way or feel this way? But it's more about their thoughts, not about who they believe themselves to be at their core. Whereas fearful avoidance, and especially dismissive avoidance, will tend to feel like, I am defective at my core. And that is a painful way to feel. And obviously there's a major cost to relationships in terms of the deactivation, the loneliness, the putting up the walls, and the sometimes connecting only to a certain degree before wanting to flee so that we avoid being seen. And a lot of people who carry this belief think, if I'm seen for who I truly am, my defectiveness will show and I will not be loved anyway, so why bother connecting in the first place? Now, when it comes to reprogramming this belief, one of the most important things you can start by doing is look for what's right about me. Okay, a lot of defectiveness is like, I am wrong at my core. What's right at my core? And you want to train your brain to start seeing how you are worthy at your core, right at your core. And you can look at what is right about my actions, my behaviors, my character, who I am in terms of my morals, my values, my beliefs, my traits. And the more you start validating and noticing that those things are good about you, right about you, effective instead of defective, this is how you'll start to equilibrate some of this belief at that level. And if you want to start more general and get more specific over time, you can ask yourself, is it possible that things are right about me? Is it possible that I'm good at my core? What are some possible reasons this could be true? And you can just warm yourself up to the idea until you feel yourself starting to build momentum and resonance with something is right about me, or I am effective instead of defective. Now, when it comes to motivation to reprogram this, it can be very beneficial to make a list of what carrying this core wound about you costs you in your life. And you can look at all 7 areas. What does this cost me in my career? What does this cost me in my finances, in my mental, emotional space, my spiritual relationship to God or to others in the spiritual community, in my physical health, right? This will show up and sort of spill into everything. And another really important component when we want to reprogram, either at the belief or the thought level, you can look for, how am I normal? And it sounds like kind of a funny cognitive reframe, but often this belief or idea that we are defective is like we're abnormal, we're an outlier, there's something so wrong with us. And just warming up to looking at how I'm normal or how I fit in, these can be effective cognitive reframes as well. And something that's really exceptionally important to notice is the difference between what you do and who you are. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice in your thoughts, if you carry this wound, you tend to spend a lot of time, if you make a mistake, going, oh, like I'm wrong for making that mistake. Something's wrong with me that I ever made that mistake. Instead of making the action wrong, you make yourself wrong. You make who you are wrong. And it's important to break that cycle and start recognizing, okay, I can make an incorrect action. I can make a mistake in life, and it doesn't make me a wrong or defective human being. It just makes me a human who makes mistakes and has occurrences like this. And one of the most important things you can do as well to reprogram this belief is to stop shaming yourself. Dismissive avoidance, fearful avoidance, anybody who's carrying this belief in general has a massive tendency to recreate it and refeeding it by shaming themselves and their thoughts. And effective equilibrators for that are looking at things that you can do to accept yourself in your thinking. So if you make a mistake, something like, oh, that's an unfortunate mistake. I can learn from that by next time doing X, Y, and Z. But I'm a human and I'm doing pretty good overall. And I'm going to make mistakes sometimes, and it's okay. And the more we can give ourselves acceptance compassion, kindness, love, the things that we didn't get in the first place, the more we're going to be able to cognitively reframe and shift our thinking and shift our beliefs as a byproduct. And of course, the way we feel and our actions will go along with that. Now, when it comes to pacifying your emotions and equilibrating, a lot of shame takes place as like heat in the face and chest region. You know how you feel like your cheeks are hot or your forehead's hot? That's usually the feeling of shame. And the best equilibrator for shame is pride. And pride usually feels like an expansion in our chest, in our shoulders, and in our face. It sort of feels like we open up and we become bigger and more empowered. And so we can practice equilibrating emotions by, when we feel shame, to sit for a moment and practice imagining this warm expansion taking place. Instead of the heat of shame, just this warm sort of glowing feeling of expansion. And that can be a useful equilibrator in terms of trying to feel pride. Now, another thought equilibrator we can use is we can work to self-affirm and encourage daily. We can look for what we're proud about, what we did that was excellent, what's right about us, what's good about what we did today, how we showed up well. And all these things will work to reinforce this concept or idea that we are effective instead of defective, or something's right about us instead of wrong about us. But again, just like with I am unworthy, I am unloved, or things that are more about who we are at our core instead of what we did, one of the best things we can do is the behavior or action reprogramming work, because we want to be able to give to ourselves what we didn't get in childhood. And what is that? Largely emotional neglect. So the opposite of this core wound can largely come about if we focus on ending the neglect in the relationship to ourselves and ending the self-defeating thoughts that we have. So this means if you catch yourself having a self-defeating thought, cancel, have an accepting thought. Have a thought that encourages you, gives you pride. Look for something you feel good about in your life. That's one section. But then the actions themselves are practicing tuning into my feelings, making my feelings acceptable and normal by feeling them myself, by making space for them myself, having a daily habit like a Vipassana meditation where you feel the sensations in your body, you notice the feelings you're having, doing feeling journaling work, practicing feeling integration exercises, doing things that allow you to make the defective parts of yourself that you've excluded or you've ostracized from the entirety of your personality or the whole, making those things acceptable again by integrating them, by having a part of you that comes to accept this part of yourself that has been neglected in the first place and is what led to you believing that something was wrong with you to begin with. Okay, so having those habits and patterns where you accept yourself and your thinking, you end the self-shaming, you encourage yourself, you do the feeling equilibration work, and you specifically have a daily action to end emotional neglect, to show up for your emotions, to be accepting of the way that you feel, your needs, your boundaries, those things included. All of these things together will very profoundly shift you out of this form of thinking, feeling, acting, and believing about who you are and what you bring to the table.